Marcy, we are live. Thank you so much for joining me.
Yeah, I'm excited to be here. Thanks for having me.
Likewise, I appreciate you taking the time. I know we've had this in the works for a few weeks now, and life happens. For everybody listening, again, my name is Robbie Martin. We're still crowdsourcing a name for this series, but for right now, I will highlight what it is, what we've been doing, and then I'll introduce today's guest, Marcy Ewald from ThinkNimble. So this series is focused around giving you really digestible opportunities to interact and learn from thought leaders, from entrepreneurs like Marcy to CISO level executive contacts within the tech space. And we're privileged that she'll be joined by Marcy today, who is COO and co-founder of ThinkNimble right here in Washington, D.C. So I think this is the first local Washingtonian since I've moved to Adams Morgan that I've interviewed. So we're probably a few blocks away from each
We
other and
probably
we
are.
didn't even know it. So Marcy, enough for me. I'll kick it over to you to introduce yourself and we'll get this thing rolling.
Awesome. Thank you. My name is Marcy Ewald. I run ThinkNimble. We are a group of about 30 developers and designers and product managers in the DC area that we help nonprofits, startups, and other small businesses build web and mobile apps to advance their businesses. I started a business here in DC in 2013 called Aspire. And we took that through the traditional growth path of a startup, raised a Series A round, and ended up selling to a local accounting firm called Rafa PC. It was a really eye-opening process, and we learned a lot in the experience and during the experience. And I think we learned a lot of do's and don'ts for how to build tech and also how to build a business that's sustainable and scalable. After we sold the business to Rafa, we stuck around for a couple of years, helping them produce technology stuff for their clients, kind of acting as the millennials in the room at the time. And then from there, we started ThinkNimble with the goal being that we wanted to help startups that didn't have the kind of path that we went on, and nonprofits and other small businesses have access to the type of technology that unicorns in San Francisco and New York have access to. And so we build web apps and mobile apps for people who are delivering meals to homebound seniors, or people who are building financial literacy tools for young students in schools. And it's been a really rewarding opportunity to introduce modern technology and how you can make real processes move faster to people who don't really understand what an app is and how it's made and how the sausage is all cooked. So we've been doing this for about 5 years here in the DC area. It's been super fun. And we're currently located in DuPont Circle. We have a really awesome office space. Happy to host anyone who is looking for an event space as well.
I love that. And for anybody listening not familiar with the DC area, we literally are maybe like 3 or 4 blocks away. So the internet connection should be strong this whole time. But I do want to point out how full circle this is a moment for me. And I didn't think about this, honestly, Marcy, until you just said this. I was in Rafa, which is now Markham's office, downtown, probably 2 or 3 times a week in my previous role working with ADP. And I saw, at least from a branding and signage perspective, the integration between Rafa and Aspire. So this is
So it's a true
wild.
story. Now
I
you
know. So this is crazy. If anybody was doubting what would happen, you've got an unbiased third-party perspective
there's a sign that proves it. And
that
if there's a
Series
sign,
A
it's real.
and subsequent acquisition is legitimate. This is wild. So we'll talk about that more one-off, Marcy, maybe over some coffee. But one of the things that I think is super topical that you mentioned, and that is becoming more and more evident with things like I was seeing this morning an article on LinkedIn that said there's a tidal wave of layoffs in San Francisco, most of them in tech. And we've seen this the last couple of months of the kind of pending recession, bear market, whatever you want to call it, and its effects on the tech space and on talent. In my mind, always goes to, how was the planning of this business done? I don't want to say poorly, but done such that there's no runway without chopping heads, right? And so one of the first questions that I was curious to hear you explain was really the difference in building and developing processes to build a business rather than approaching it from just a product. A lot of people seem to approach it from, let's build the shiniest product possible, and then we'll figure out the business, and then we'll figure out if it actually works. But it sounds like you have a unique approach where you focused much more on the development and processes from a business aspect. So I'd love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's a key tenet of what we learned at Aspire. We were young, we had an idea, and it was fine, but it wasn't necessarily something that was going to be sustainable long term. It wasn't well protected from competitors, but that didn't really seem to be the questions that we were getting in the boardrooms. And so ThinkNimble was really founded with that learning in place, which was technology was built as a tool to make manual processes go faster. It wasn't really built to be a magic bullet. And so our philosophy at ThinkNimble really is, if you can't do it manually, your technology probably won't solve your problem, unless you're working in crypto or in something where, truthfully, you can't do it manually.
Right.
Almost every business can at least do a proof of concept through a manual process. And then what you learn is where your bottlenecks in your business are. And that's where technology can really help you turn up the heat and pour kind of money into a funnel that actually produces results, right? And so I think that's what we typically focus our clients on is, what is the thing that's taking you time? What's the thing that you think could work better? What's the thing that people are just raving about that you want to produce more of? And let's see if we can make that thing go faster, work better, or be shinier, right? And see how that impacts your bottom line. So every product feature you build or every roadmap we put together should be driving a business outcome that is tied to something you think is true, right? When you're running a business, you typically know 5 things are true, and then you're trying to prove out 3 things. So when we were running Aspire, the thing that we knew was true was that we could find a certain number of employee-focused companies in different cities and get them to work with us to help improve their employee engagement. But the thing we didn't know was how much that would cost to set up each system in each city, right? And so that was the thing that we were trying to prove with our Series A round, was how much can we shrink our cost of customer acquisition? And that was the test that we were asking investors to come with us on. And none of us knew the answer to that, right? That was the whole point of the investment. If we knew the answer, we wouldn't have needed the investment. And so I think a lot of times startups and small businesses get stuck in this, if I just had some more money, it would work idea.
Yeah.
But the idea really should be like, I don't know if this thing is true. Can you help me provide some runway so I can test it? And then together we'll figure out whether it's true or not and what the path forward is. And even if it's untrue, there still might be a path forward. But really getting specific about what that hypothesis is has been really powerful for our companies.
Was that pretty well received? I think most founders go into, or there's this stigma, it's like, I need to go into this VC pitch meeting having the answers to every single question. But was it the honesty and the introspection appreciated of saying, this is what we need it for? We need to test, we need to iterate, we need to figure out.
Yeah, so actually what caused the realization was the opposite. So we were in an investor meeting and the investor said, what if you only raise half the amount of money? And we were just kind of dumbfounded, which sounds crazy, right? Like we had an answer and we kind of pulled it together, but thinking about it realistically, like what if we only had half the amount of money? What was the point of the number we were asking for, right? We kind of had like a use of funds slide and it broke down the different people and what we were going to do. But what was the real impact if we cut that in half? Were we going to grow half as fast, a quarter as fast? Could we not grow at all? Did we not even want to move forward if we moved half or raised half? And so that question really helped us focus in on like, this is why we need this amount. If we do this amount, here's what our test would look like instead. And so it's really more building up the experiment, and you can pay for that experiment, right? And the experiment has to change if the budget changes, and that experiment will then have different results. And I think that framing for investors, they were like, ah, yes, that is what I'm doing with my money, right? I'm running an experiment with you. And I think that experiment will pay off more than the market. That's why I'm here.
Right.
And so I think it was like a level setting moment with investors. So it was a powerful moment, and I'm glad they asked us that question, even though
I bet.
Kind of scary.
I can tell how excited you are having worked through that, but I'm sure you were sweating a little bit in the moment.
Exactly.
And everything that we've talked about thus far has been process driven. But at the end of the day, you're working with people to solve challenges, whether those are your investors and silent partners, whether those are your co-founders. or they're your clients and employees. So when you all approach this from such a process level perspective, I'm sure that there's consideration given to how people and the human element factors into that. So once you've outlined these processes, once you've outlined, we're at A, this process is going to help us get to B by automation, by whatever that's going to be in between there. How do you then blend the people and the process pieces together?
Yeah, so I think process really allows you to deconstruct the magic that you think you bring to a scenario. So I think a lot of times we have hubris that if our hands aren't on the product, that it won't work. And I think process gives you the ability to define outcomes clearly, which lets other people bring their magic to the scenario.
Sure.
And so the way for me that process really plays into everything is that it gives you an end point that you've all defined together as success. And then it gives you the ability and the requirement really to step out of the business creation and allow someone else to create that business with you, not for you.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think as a leader, right, your job is to kind of create these systems and see how they interact with each other, and then to bring those interactions together to update your processes. So it's really more that like the processes become the guardrails for the frameworks to work, and your job is to figure out what's wrong with those end goals that you've set, right? So I think we'll get to this on the growth team, but there's ways that you can set metrics and barometers that are really task focused, and then there's ways that you can say like, look, together this is the outcome that we want to achieve. This is the feeling we want to bring. This is the thing we're trying to prove. And I want you to take your specific skill sets and your, talent and make this happen in whatever way works for you. And I think great people really are able to self-correct and manage to those problems in a way that you being in the weeds and micromanaging alongside them really undermines their capacity to move forward. So I think that's what we've been really focused on here, especially as we grew from 10 to 30 people. It became a really big focus of ours at ThinkNimble, because it came to the point where I literally, my 2 hours on a project were not even a drop in the bucket of how much time was kind of going into the project in that week. And so
Right.
if we didn't have shared systems and shared outcomes and shared understandings, then I couldn't correct it in that amount of time. So I had to find a way to make a system kind of guide that, not me.
Right. And I think it's an interesting pivot point that a lot of founders face. And to your point, there's some hubris involved. This isn't going to work unless my fingerprints are all over it. So I imagine at some point, and I'm not sure if sophomore is probably not the right word, but this is your second go round from founder, fundraise, building a sustainable business. You don't need to disclose what any kind of next steps or what your plan for ThinkNimble is, but it seems like in every kind of founder's journey, when you're undergoing growth, there's that inflection point of this organization, this business, this startup is going to change from being completely founder-led, from a RevOps, from a go-to-market, from a design, from an operations perspective. And then to your point just now, I need to bring other people into the fold and we need to build this together. What are your thoughts and what are your experiences of that inflection point of going from founder-led sales, founder-led everything, to then building a team to fit into those processes and then work with the people?
Yeah, so we have a really great business coach. His name's Chase Damiano, and
Shout out Chase.
yeah, he keeps us honest, which is tough, but we appreciate him for it. But he kind of has walked us through this. There's different inflection points, like when you go from 3 people to 10 people, and then 10 people to 30 people, and then 30 to 100, right? You have all of the systems break down again. You have to start totally over from scratch. And what's working today probably won't work in a week. And that's something that I think as a recovering perfectionist, we all struggle with. But I think what we really started to look at was this role of alignment and integration systems. So your job as a chief officer of a company, or as a head of product, or as a head of, even as like a product manager, right, owning a little piece of the product roadmap, is to integrate different groups and different pieces of feedback into a single plan, and then decide how resources can really play into that plan. and to leverage those resources in a way that means you're actually investing, not just kind of like, I think a lot of times we think of resources as being endless, and really resources are always a trade-off. And so part of the job of that person is to figure out, what do we need to turn down so we can turn something else up. And I think that's a really hard, especially as a founder, when there is no turn down, right? It's always turning up, it's always giving more, it's that hustle culture.
Sure.
You really have to figure out, what can you turn down so that this thing can actually be invested in. Especially when you're running a healthy team, you have to be able to kind of step back and put yourself into a system that consistently produces results, doesn't rely on one person, because that person could leave, that person could need time off. And so if your system isn't in place, then what you're doing is just replacing yourself with another version of yourself, right? Creating mini Marcy's.
Sure. Which we could use some more of, I'm sure.
I mean, I definitely started hiring that way. My first hire will tell you, I asked her to become a mini me. She did a great job, but now, we'll see how it goes from here. So I think we recently did this on the sales team. So I won't pretend this has been an overnight success. We've been at it for 2 years. And we're finally starting to like really see the results of that investment, right? But I think when we first started, we said like, okay, every sales email has to be responded to in 24 hours. That's like our rule on our team. And that was fine, but like, it didn't really give anybody the ability to innovate, right?
Sure.
It didn't necessarily give them the ability to capitalize on their skill sets. So we had someone say, what is the point of that? Why? And we were kind of like, I don't know, just how we do things, right? But it came to light that the reason we were doing that is because we wanted to build trust with our clients. So instead of saying you have to respond to every email within 24 hours, we said the outcome that we seek is that every person who's interacted with us trusts us. However you want to make that happen, great, let's go do that. So then we had someone who said, okay, well, I want to meet with every customer face to face then. And then we had customers in California and New York, and that was not going to be feasible within the budget, right? So then we put in a parameter and we said, okay, given $5,000 a year, we want you to build trust with every client. Now they have ability to make their own decisions. They know exactly what a successful outcome looks like. We can report on that outcome every week. And I don't have to be involved in the day-to-day decision making. I'm involved in the outcome driving. And so it gave us the real ability to scale time and scale effort in a way that 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I wouldn't have had the ability to think through, right? I would have just set standards or things that we do. This is how we do things around here. And it just wasn't the most efficient way to grow our team.
Got you. Well, it sounds so simple, but it really is brilliant insight. But Marcy, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much for joining. I am still kind of processing kind of the journey we just went on. And I think this is going to be super valuable for people that are starting businesses, people that have been mulling it over for years and don't want to take the jump. And I hope this is an awesome testament to the leadership that's driving a really awesome initiative within the district called ThinkNimble. So COO and co-founder Marcy Ewald from ThinkNimble, thanks so much for being a part of this. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks for your time.